Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
When I finally bought my dream home, a picturesque craftsman-style bungalow with a lush backyard perfect for my retriever, Max, I felt like I'd achieved a slice of paradise. Moving to the serene town of Redwood Creek was supposed to be the beginning of a peaceful chapter in my life. But paradise had a catch: the Homeowners Association. They welcomed me with a starter pack that could double as a doorstop. The packet detailed rules ranging from the height of fences to the types of flowers permissible in gardens. It was tedious but seemed manageable. That is, until I encountered Nancy Erickson, the Homeowner Association president and self-anointed enforcer of community harmony. Nancy's sharp eyes and sharper tongue were infamous among the neighbors, and she wielded her clipboard like a scepter. Our first meeting was over the unauthorized wind chime I'd hung on my porch. I brushed it off, figuring it wasn't worth the fight. 6 months later, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by an 8-foot-tall wrought iron gate. The absurdity hit me before the anger did. A gate, bolted into the concrete, completely cut off access to the street. Max barked furiously, pacing by the obstruction as if to say, "What are you going to do about this?" Taped to the gate was a letter bearing the Homeowner Association logo. It explained that this enhancement was part of a traffic control initiative. Traffic control? I lived at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac where the only vehicles belonged to neighbors or delivery drivers. It was nonsense. I stormed down the street to Nancy's house. Her home, a pristine white colonial with a lawn that looked like it was groomed with nail scissors, screamed perfectionism. Nancy greeted me with her signature icy smile. "What's this about a gate blocking my driveway?" I demanded, brandishing the notice. She tilted her head in mock concern. "Oh, the gate? It's necessary to preserve the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood." "Aesthetic integrity? It's my driveway. You had no right to install that without my consent." "Actually, the Homeowner Association owns the easement," she replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "You should have read page 34 of the guidelines." That's when it clicked. Nancy wasn't just enforcing the rules. She was making them up as she went along. Furious but determined, I returned home and started digging through the Homeowner Association bylaws. Hours later, with legal jargon swirling in my head, I found a critical loophole. The bylaws clearly stated that structural changes to private property required the homeowner's explicit written consent. Nancy had overstepped. The next day, I sent her a formal letter demanding the gate's removal. Her response arrived swiftly: a $500 fine for obstructing community improvements. It was absurd, and I wasn't about to back down. As the days passed, I began hearing whispers from other neighbors who had their own grievances with Nancy. There was Tim, who'd been fined for planting roses instead of tulips, and Sarah, whose kids' sidewalk chalk drawings had been labeled vandalism. Fueled by mutual frustration, we formed a small but determined group, the Homeowner Association Resistance. We started by documenting every questionable action Nancy had taken: the fines, the unexplained community improvement fees, and even her suspiciously luxurious landscaping upgrades. The more we dug, the clearer it became that Nancy wasn't just overzealous. She was exploiting her position. Our first major move was filing a formal complaint with the county. We highlighted her violations of both Homeowner Association bylaws and local property laws. Meanwhile, I reached out to an old friend, Alex, who happened to be a lawyer. Alex was more than happy to draft a cease and desist letter. But Nancy wasn't one to back down quietly. A week later, another letter arrived in my mailbox. This time, she accused me of fostering community unrest and threatened further fines if I continued my disruptive behavior. It was clear she was escalating, but so were we. At our next resistance meeting, held in my living room, we laid out our strategy. We would expose Nancy at the upcoming Homeowner Association meeting, armed with evidence and bolstered by growing support from other neighbors. As I looked around the room at the determined faces of my newfound allies, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Nancy might have her clipboard, but we had something stronger: the truth. The Homeowner Association meeting was set for the following week. Until then, we gathered signatures for a petition to call for a vote of no confidence in Nancy's leadership. By the time the meeting rolled around, nearly every homeowner in the neighborhood was on our side. The showdown was imminent, and I could feel the tension in the air. Nancy didn't know it yet, but her reign of clipboard tyranny was about to come crashing down. The homeowner association meeting was held in the community center, a modest building with beige walls that perfectly matched the neighborhood's obsessive conformity. By the time I arrived, the room was already filling up. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, and the atmosphere buzzed with tension. Nancy sat at the front, her clipboard resting prominently on the table before her, as if it were some kind of shield. She was flanked by two board members who looked more uncomfortable than loyal. I found a seat near the middle of the room, surrounded by my allies from the homeowner association resistance. Tim gave me a thumbs up, and Sarah whispered, "We've got this." I hope she was right. Months of frustration had led to this moment, and we needed everything to go according to plan. The meeting began with the usual formalities: approval of the previous meeting's minutes, updates on landscaping projects, and a brief discussion about the upcoming neighborhood potluck. But no one was paying attention. All eyes were on Nancy, who maintained her usual air of smug authority. When it was time for the open forum, I stood up, holding the petition we'd spent weeks gathering. "I'd like to address the matter of the unauthorized gate installed on my driveway," I began. A murmur rippled through the room. Nancy's eyes narrowed. "That issue has already been resolved," she said sharply. "Actually, it hasn't," I replied, my voice steady. "The gate was installed without my consent, which violates homeowner association bylaws, and it's not the only questionable action that's been taken under your leadership." I handed copies of the petition to the neighbors seated closest to me. Tim stood up and started passing out additional copies. The petition wasn't just about the gate. It listed every instance of Nancy's overreach, from arbitrary fines to the misuse of homeowner association funds. Nancy's face hardened. "This is highly inappropriate. The board has always acted in the best interest of the community. Then why haven't we had an audit of homeowner association finances in over 5 years?" I asked, my voice rising. "Why are there no records of how our dues are being spent? And why is it that only your house seems to benefit from these so-called community improvements?" The room erupted in murmurs. People began flipping through the petition, pointing at specific examples. Janet, another member of our group, stood up. "I was fined $200 for having a bird bath in my front yard. Meanwhile, Nancy's house has brand new landscaping that wasn't approved by any vote." Nancy's grip on her clipboard tightened. "These accusations are baseless and inflammatory," she said, her voice rising. "This meeting is not the place for personal attacks." "This isn't personal," I shot back. "It's about accountability." Doug, our lawyer and my longtime friend, stood up. He was dressed sharply in a suit, radiating confidence. "As a legal representative for several homeowners here, I've reviewed the homeowner association's bylaws and financial records, or rather, the lack of financial records. Nancy, your failure to provide transparency isn't just unethical, it's illegal." The tension in the room was palpable. Nancy tried to interject, but Doug cut her off. "We've already filed a formal complaint with the county. An investigation is underway, and unless you can provide a detailed accounting of how homeowner association funds have been used, I'm afraid your position is no longer tenable." The room erupted in whispers and a few scattered claps. Nancy's face flushed crimson. She looked around the room, perhaps searching for support, but the expressions she met ranged from skeptical to outright hostile. "I move to call a vote of no confidence in Nancy Erickson as homeowner association president," I said loudly. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a younger man named Eric, cleared his throat. "A motion has been made. All in favor?" Hands shot up across the room. Tim, Sarah, Janet, and nearly every other homeowner raised their hands. Even Eric and the other board member hesitated before reluctantly voting in favor. Nancy's hand stayed firmly on her clipboard, which she clutched as if it could shield her from the overwhelming majority. "The motion passes," Eric said, his voice shaky but firm. "Nancy Erickson is hereby removed as homeowner association president, effective immediately." The room broke into applause. Nancy stood up, her face a mask of disbelief. She muttered something about ungrateful residents and stormed out, leaving her clipboard behind. As the door closed behind her, Eric cleared his throat again. "We'll need to appoint an interim president until elections can be held. Are there any nominations?" Tim stood up. "I nominate Bill. He's organized, fair, and knows how to get things done without stepping on anyone's toes." Bill, who had been sitting quietly in the back, looked surprised but nodded. "I'd be honored," he answered. "Sorai one," he said. The vote was unanimous. As Bill took the seat at the front of the room, a sense of relief washed over me. The battle wasn't over. We still had to address the financial discrepancies and implement new policies to prevent future abuses. But we had won the first and most critical fight. That night, as I returned home, I couldn't help but smile as I looked at the gate still blocking my driveway. Its days were numbered, just like Nancy's reign had been. Max wagged his tail, sensing the change. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt like it was ours again. In the days following Nancy's removal, a sense of cautious optimism settled over the neighborhood. Bill wasted no time stepping into his role as interim homeowner association president. His first order of business was addressing the most pressing issue, the wrought iron gate blocking my driveway. By the end of the week, a contractor arrived to remove it, and watching that monstrosity come down felt like a personal victory. Max barked joyfully, prancing around the now clear driveway as if celebrating the win. But as satisfying as it was to reclaim my driveway, the battle against Nancy's legacy was far from over. The audit of the homeowner association's finances revealed a mess worse than we'd anticipated. Misappropriated funds, unexplained expenses, and years of unfiled tax documents painted a picture of gross negligence or deliberate fraud. Bill called an emergency meeting to discuss the findings and chart a path forward. The meeting was held in the same community center that had been the stage for Nancy's downfall. This time, the atmosphere was less charged but still tense. Bill stood at the front, flanked by Doug, who had agreed to serve as the homeowner association's legal advisor. A projector displayed a slide titled, "Financial Discrepancies and Next Steps." "Thank you all for coming," Bill began, his tone measured but serious. "As many of you know, the audit revealed significant issues with the homeowner association's finances. Tonight, we'll discuss what we found and how we're going to fix it." Doug took over, walking everyone through the findings. The slush fund Nancy had created for miscellaneous expenses turned out to be a catch-all for personal indulgences. Catered meals, luxury landscaping for her property, and even a consulting fee paid to her cousin, who lived out of state and had no known qualifications. The total amount unaccounted for was staggering, nearly $50,000 over the past 5 years. "This is unacceptable," Doug said, his voice firm. "We've already reported these findings to the county, and an investigation is underway. In the meantime, we need to focus on rebuilding trust and ensuring this never happens again." Bill outlined a series of reforms, including mandatory annual audits, stricter oversight of expenditures, and a complete overhaul of the homeowner association's bylaws. The room was filled with murmurs of agreement and the occasional outburst of anger over Nancy's blatant corruption. "What happens to Nancy?" someone called out from the back. Doug stepped forward. "That's up to the county prosecutor. Based on what we've uncovered, there's a strong case for criminal charges. If convicted, she could face significant penalties." The response was a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. For years, Nancy had ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist, and now she was facing the consequences of her actions. It was a bittersweet moment for many, but for me, it was a reminder that justice, while slow, was inevitable. As the meeting wrapped up, Bill opened the floor for questions and suggestions. One neighbor proposed hosting a community event to rebuild morale, and another suggested forming committees to oversee specific areas like landscaping and community events. The ideas flowed freely, a stark contrast to the rigid, fear-driven meetings under Nancy's regime. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood began to transform. Bill's transparent leadership style encouraged participation, and more people started attending meetings. The newly formed committees tackled everything from organizing a block party to reviewing landscaping contracts. For the first time in years, the homeowner association felt like a true community effort rather than a dictatorship. Meanwhile, the county's investigation into Nancy progressed. Rumors swirled about potential embezzlement charges, and it wasn't long before an official announcement confirmed what many had suspected. Nancy was being indicted on multiple counts of fraud and mismanagement. She had left the neighborhood shortly after her removal, but the legal system was catching up to her. One morning, I received a call from Doug. "Thought you'd like to know," he said. "Nancy's trial is set for next month. Looks like she's hired a defense attorney, but with the evidence we've provided, she's got an uphill battle." Good on, I replied. She deserves to be held accountable. Doug chuckled. Justice can be slow, but it's thorough. Keep an eye out for the court summons. They might want you to testify. Life in the neighborhood continued to improve. The block party was a resounding success, complete with a barbecue, live music, and even a bouncy house for the kids. Max enjoyed himself too, making friends with other dogs and basking in the attention of neighbors who now recognized him as the unofficial mascot of the Homeowner Association resistance. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I reflected on how far we'd come. The fight against Nancy had been exhausting, but it had also brought the community together in a way I hadn't thought possible. We'd proven that even the most entrenched corruption could be uprooted with persistence and solidarity. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nancy's shadow lingered. Her trial was approaching, and while I was confident in the strength of our case, I knew she wasn't the type to go down without a fight. The next chapter in this saga was about to unfold, and I was ready for whatever came next. The day of Nancy's trial finally arrived, bringing with it a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The courthouse buzzed with activity as reporters, legal teams, and curious onlookers gathered to witness what had become the talk of Redwood Creek. For the neighbors who had suffered under Nancy's rule, this day felt like a reckoning. I sat among them, clutching a folder filled with my documentation of her wrongdoings, evidence that would play a key role in the case. Nancy entered the courtroom with her attorney, a slick-looking man who radiated confidence. She, on the other hand, appeared less composed. Gone was her trademark icy smile, replaced by a tight expression that hinted at her unease. Her clipboard was nowhere in sight. The prosecution's case was damning. Doug, serving as a key witness, detailed the findings of the audit. Tens of thousands of dollars misappropriated, falsified records, and a trail of financial irregularities that painted a clear picture of fraud. My testimony came next. I recounted the installation of the gate, the bogus fines, and the intimidation tactics she'd used against anyone who dared challenge her authority. She treated the Homeowner Association like her personal kingdom, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. It wasn't about community, it was about control. Nancy's attorney tried to discredit the witnesses, painting the resistance as a group of disgruntled neighbors with a vendetta, but the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, financial records, and even photos of her community improvements, all of which had benefited her own property, left little room for doubt. By the time the prosecution rested, it was clear that Nancy's defense was fighting an uphill battle. The trial lasted several days, but the verdict was swift. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Nancy's sentencing was scheduled for a later date, but the weight of the verdict was enough to bring a sense of closure to those of us who'd fought so hard to expose her corruption. Back in Redwood Creek, life continued to move forward. Bill was officially elected as Homeowner Association president in a landslide vote, and his leadership brought a renewed sense of trust and transparency. Under his guidance, the Homeowner Association implemented the reforms we discussed, including regular audits and a cap on fines to prevent future abuse. The community began to heal. Neighbors who'd once kept to themselves started participating in events and meetings. The block party became an annual tradition, and committees formed to tackle everything from beautification projects to planning a neighborhood garden. It felt like we'd not only removed a source of division, but also built something stronger in its place. One sunny afternoon, I was out in the yard throwing a ball for Max when Bill stopped by. "Got a minute?" he asked, holding a small box. "Sure," I said, curious. He handed me the box. Inside was a polished plaque engraved with the words, "To our unofficial leader. Thank you for standing up for what's right." I laughed, touched by the gesture. "I didn't do it alone," I said, looking over at Max, who wagged his tail as if he'd played a key role too. "Maybe not," Bill said, "but you got the ball rolling, and we're all better for it." As he left, I thought about how far we'd come. The fight against Nancy had been exhausting and at times disheartening, but it had also united us in a way nothing else could have. Redwood Creek was no longer just a collection of houses, it was a community. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with Max at my feet, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and orange. For the first time in a long while, everything felt peaceful. The clipboard tyranny was over, and in its place was something far more enduring. The knowledge that when people stand together, they can overcome even the most entrenched challenges. As the final rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, I smiled and patted Max's head. We did good, buddy. His tail thumped in agreement. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow.